Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Pits of Motorcast. It's your host, Dave. I got on line special guest, 41 Willy Pro Mod driver, Brandon Wakeling. How's it going, Brandon?
Real good. How are you, Dave?
I'm good. So how's the weather out by you?
Well, man, it's been cold the last few days, but I was in Florida for the U.S. Street Nationals down in Bradenton over the last few days, so it was a lot nicer down there than it was up here, I guess. But it was about an 85-degree swing coming from down there to coming up here, so I got the full breadth of it as soon as I got here.
Yeah, we were in the negative up here in Illinois Wednesday and Thursday. Both were like negative 23 on Wednesday. Yeah, new record for Chicago, I guess.
Yeah, we're actually really good here today. It's probably in the 20s, but it's supposed to be almost 50 by Sunday. So it's screwy weather, just enough to get everybody sick.
Exactly. That's the same weather we're supposed to get up here to around 50 Sunday and Monday.
Yep.
Yeah. So how'd you do up there in Florida?
Well, we were just down there hanging out with some of our friends, and I just bought a new supercharger for the hot rod, so went down there and paid for that, and just hung out with a couple buddies and got some ideas for the car for next year, and just had a good time with some family and friends down there.
No, you didn't bring the car up there and run?
We really don't have enough for those guys yet, but we're working on it. We're switching away from nitrous this year. We're going to supercharged combo for next year. So we're definitely going to have the power next year. It's going to be just trying to get my old school mentality with my manual shifters and my clutch pedal together, so we can go out there and hang with everybody.
There you go. You just let the cat out of the bag that you're going to the blower now.
Yeah, that's the kitty that's been in the bag. I haven't been real secretive about it because there's a lot of people involved in it, so it's hard to keep something like that under wraps. And to be honest with you, I don't know enough about superchargers to do it on my own. So making this change, I'm really relying on a lot of good friends and a lot of good feedback from people, and so far so good. I've had a lot of good input from people and made some right decisions. So I think it's going to be a lot easier transition going to the blow and stuff than it would be if I was going to turbos and EFI and all that stuff. But at the same time, it's still all Greek to me. So I'm going to do the best I can with what I got, and we're going to go out and have fun like we always do.
What kind of blower are you putting on that car?
It's going to be a Roots 1471. It's a billet case blower. So it should be a really good piece. The guy I got it from, it runs good for him. So I'm being told from everybody that I'm working on this with, this should be the right blower for my combination, and I should be able to be competitive with a Roots setup and not really beat up parts on the lower end all the time like you would with a screw.
That's cool. So now, how'd you do last year with the car with the nitrous?
Well, we had a really rough season last year. We had some family medical issues going on early on in the spring, so it really kind of put a damper on just even getting the car freshened up from over the winter. My girlfriend's dad had a stroke, and we really struggled with that getting through spring. But once we got rolling in the summer, we got the car back together midsummer. We went out in July and did pretty well with the car. We set some personal bests and really had a great time doing it. And then we went down to shakedown, and we struggled like crazy for some reason. And I mean, we went right from making 3 of the best passes we ever made at Milan, and we go to Norwalk, which is, the track was tip top, the weather was really good, and we just couldn't get down off the starting line. I mean, let alone getting down the track. And then last round of qualifying, we wound up actually cracking the engine block, so kind of put us back quite a bit. So we ended up finding out the reason it was way down on power, the reason it was shaking the tires as bad as it was is because the clutch was just locking immediately, probably because we were down about 300 or 400 horsepower because of the cracked block. So we got that figured out, and then that was kind of the decision-making point. I said, we're just really leaning on this thing too hard for what we've got, and we need to make a decision on changing either to a really big cubic inch nitrous engine or just switching over to a blown combo, blown Hemi. And I made the decision at that point against a lot of other people's suggestions on my team. My guys are really they really like what we got, and we really have done well with what we've had. They were kind of reluctant to want to switch, but I think as soon as they hear that sucker start up, I think they're going to have a different opinion on it.
So how's your girlfriend's dad doing now?
Not doing good. He's actually sitting right here next to me. He's been living with us for the last few months, and it's been good having him here. And he's made some really great progress. So next year he'll be at the track with us every race again, just like usual, and he'll be right back to the status quo that we're used to, except we'll be flying.
Well, that's good to hear. My mom had a stroke. Before she passed away, she had a stroke. She was paralyzed on the right side for years and years till she finally passed away. But my dad had to take care of her every day. And yeah, it was terrible.
Yeah, it's tough, but we're getting through it, and he's making really good progress.
Yeah. So, Brandon, how did it begin for you to get into drag racing in the first place?
Well, it all started, I was about 8 years old, and we were on our way to Boy Scout camp, believe it or not. I was actually riding along with my dad, and it was my brother's Boy Scout camp, and I was just kind of riding along because my dad was the pack leader. So I decided, my dad decided, cruising down the highway. We were right along the side of Milan Dragway, and we saw the big sign for, I believe it was called the Northern Nationals back then. And we had a few hours to spare, and my dad said, "Hey, you guys want to swing by the drag strip and check it out?" And neither of us had ever been exposed to racing at all, let alone just seeing it firsthand. So, I mean, we watched it on TV every once in a while, but neither of us have ever really been around it. And so me and my brother both had this great idea, let's go check out drag racing. So I got to meet one of my all-time idols, Ricky Smith, for the first time at 8 years old. He was running pro stock back then, but I remember meeting Gene Snow, and there was just a ton of big names that I met. The Colettas were there, and there was just a ton of really big-time racers. And being 8 years old and getting to go see these guys and meet them and talk to them, it was from that day on pretty much. I said I'm going to be a drag racer when I get older. And believe it or not, it was actually I was just in elementary school. I don't know if I was or kindergarten or if I was in first or second grade, but the teacher asked us to bring in a picture when we were a baby, and then basically write on this picture what we were going to be, when we got older. And then they stuck the pictures all around the room for the year. And I've still got this thing. My mom found it a couple years back. It actually says future drag racer on it. I was in like third or fourth grade or something at the time, so that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
But anyway, I grew up a little bit. We started. My parents bought a '67 Camaro, and I was really digging that thing, and took it for a ride across the front yard one time by accident. Threw it out of park, and we kind of went out of the driveway and across in my neighbor's yard, and just because I was in there trying to drive the thing. And then 13 years old, I saw a car sitting on the side of the road that I just fell in love with. And my dad was looking at a '69 Chevelle at the time, and that car kind of got sold out from under us, and it really wasn't what we wanted anyway. We wanted something we could tinker with. And the one he was looking at was a Primo, fully restored '69, all original, something you don't really want to tear apart to screw with. But one day, my parents were out of town, and I found this '67 Chevelle sitting on the side of the road. My brother and I stopped in and took a look at this thing, and I called my parents that night in Virginia. I told my dad, I said, we need to buy this car. And he actually told me to go call the number and talk to the person and tell them that when they get home, they'll buy it. So they basically bought it sight unseen. We didn't have cell phones where you could even send pictures back then.
Right. So
my dad trusted me, and we committed to it. The second he got home, we went and bought it. And so that was kind of my first real experience with a hot rod that I actually picked out myself. And then over the years, it went from a small block 327 to a 502 to a supercharged 502, and then I put another motor I had put together a few years before that, a little 482 back in it, trans brake, and we beat the crap out of this car throughout its entire life. And I still have the car today, believe it or not. But the story goes, my first time down a drag strip, I was 15. It was the weekend before my 16th birthday. And I had my driver's permit, but I didn't have a driver's license yet. And my dad said, all right, well, here's your birthday present. You get the car for the weekend. You can do whatever you want with it. And, of course, we were doing car shows and stuff at the time, and I'm sure he assumed that I would want to go to a car show. Well, of course, me being me, I went out in the garage and put a toolbox together and some coolers and put some chairs in the trunk, and he shows up and says, all right, where are we going? I said, we're going to the drag strip. And he kind of had this goofy look like, you're not even old enough. And he said, they'll let me go down. So we ended up, and I went racing that day. It was a Saturday, Sunday weekend where I raced both days. And then we raced that car every weekend from then until I went away to college. Wednesday night, Friday and Saturday, every night, or every week. If it was not raining, we were at the drag strip with that thing. So I really enjoyed it. We had a really good time. I was actually going through an automotive college. And at that point, I decided that, I really wanted to start going fast, and I was going to start putting a cage in the car and cutting it up and getting it converted from a mostly street machine over to a race car. And my dad kind of pulled back the reins a little bit and said, you know what? You're about to graduate college. I'll buy you a. And I was actually really, really crappy high school student, but I did really well in college. Had a 3.85 when I graduated. And my dad said, you know what? Since you did so well and you really pulled your head out of your butt, I'll buy you your first car for your graduation present. So he bought me a really nice back half 68 Camaro, and through school I put a really decent engine together, a 482, and we threw that motor in the car, and from that weekend on until about 2000, it was about probably 2009, 2010, I raced that car every weekend. You know, my father and I were really, really big into it. We would go out anywhere we could go to. So we raced up in Canada, we raced Ohio, Indiana, any place we could find a track, we were racing. No, so I started getting ready to cut that car up. I was going to actually build an Outlaw 10.5 car out of it. It had a factory firewall and some factory frame rails in it, so I figured, this would be a good opportunity to build an Outlaw 10.5 car. So I started cutting out of it, and I got about, 2/3 of the way of tearing it down, and I said, you know what? As much as I try, this car will never be what I really want. No matter how hard I try, and I'll always be modifying it or changing it, changing stuff on the chassis. So I just hung up that thing and put it in the back burner, and actually called McCamus that weekend, and I said, you know what, build me a new car. And he built me a brand new chassis, and Harry's Glass did the body, and that was the birth of the Willys. So I ordered it in 2006, and I actually got it, I picked it up in 2007 from him. It took about, 4, 5, 6 months to get it built. And once I got it home, it took me about 4 or 5 years to piece it all together and get the body work done on it. Had some really, really good friends helping me out with that. Some guys helped me out big time with the tin work, and my Uncle Al, my Big Al, he helped me out big time. Unfortunately, he's passed away now, but he let me use his shop, and my Uncle Little Al came out every weekend with me when he was around, and he would help me out. My friend Kenny and a bunch of my other buddies would come out and help me piece this thing together. And we got the car all ready to go and ready for some black primer, because at that point I was pretty much tapped out of money. I said, you know what, I'm just going to throw a coat of black primer on this thing, and we're going to go racing. And my good friend Dave and Easy Veezy talked me out of it. They ended up talking me into a really, really killer paint job, the paint job that's on the car now. And to be honest with you, I can't thank them enough, because that has really brought some exposure to my team, just because of the way the car looks. And then we go out and we perform pretty well with what we've got. You know, we're a very low budget team comparatively, but for what we got and for who we've got working with us and stuff, we really do a really bang up job. We have a blast. We keep parts together, and typically we're out there in the middle of the field. You know, we run shakedown for the last I think 5 years. And when you go to shakedown, you're racing against some of the fastest pro mod cars in the country. And there's not a year that's gone by that we didn't qualify in pro mod, you know, with an engine that was built back in the 90s. So I mean, that's saying something, you know. And we've had our trials and tribulations. We tore up some parts, but actually we were having some piston burn issues for a while, and I got a hold of Steve Johnson down at Induction Solutions and Dale Cubic, CFM Carburetors. And I bought a new race pack, data logger, O2 sensors, and all that stuff. But then I had those guys do my induction system properly. And we went from burning a piston about every 5 to 10 runs to we literally put 65 passes on it. And we had the valve covers off of it about, 5 or 6 times to check lash. But that motor was just so solid, you could go race top sportsman anywhere in the world with that thing. To be competitive, because we were running mid 420s to 440. In a 2,750-pound car. So it's a heavy car to be running that quick and not tearing stuff up regularly. So I think we went 2 full seasons on it at one point. We took it apart in between just to look at it, but we really didn't have to do anything to it. That was really nice. It was an expensive change getting all that stuff modified, but once we got it done, it was way worth the money.
No.
So, and then here we are today. Decide that we're having fun doing what we're doing, but I'm the butt in the seat, and I'm kind of getting bored with it. I want to go fast, and I want to get from the point where we're at, where we're kind of bottom of the field, bottom of the pack in most big events, to I want to be top. I want to be in the top half, and I want to be when I pull up alongside of somebody, I don't want them to look over and be like, "Oh man, we got this guy covered." I want them to go, "We got to worry about this dude. If he trees us, we're going to have a problem."
Now, who did you say did the paint job on your car?
His name's Dave Myers. Did the prep and the color on it, but Easy VZ or Mike VZ, he did all the detail and artwork on it. Did the pinup girls on the side and all the artwork on it. He's on Facebook. It's E.Z. and then ZZ VESEY VEASEY. I believe. Of course, I'm on the spot now. I can't remember, but the guy's awesome. He does great pinstripe work. He does a really, really nice job. He's actually the one that came up with the paint schemes. Like I said, when we started talking about flat black, he and Dave were both looking at me like, "You're absolutely nuts. You got this perfect canvas. You're just going to paint it primer and send it. That's just stupid." So, and then of course, we got it all painted, and I was like, got a brand new, beautiful car. We have to do Autorama with it. It's never even done a burnout, so we gotta do Autorama. And we really had a great time and had some beautiful cars that we were competing against. But I mean, just the people we even met there was a huge, huge benefit to our team. In fact, I met two of my biggest sponsors, the guys that have supported me for the longest time. I met at that show. Greg Cylinderhead does all my machine work and stuff for me and lets me. I build all my own engines, but he does all the machine work for me and lets me build them in his shop. So he was one of my first sponsors there, and then of course Mechanical Heating and Cooling. They're my primary sponsor, and I actually met all those guys at Autorama for the very first time. We're all best of friends now at this point. So then a couple of years later at Autorama, I picked up my girlfriend's veterinary clinic, Taylor Vet Clinic. We picked them up as a sponsor, and they come out every year to one of our events, and we should put on a big party for them. It's their annual employee appreciation party, and it's always a huge hit. We rent out the suite for them and everything, and they really have a good time with it. And then of course we got Ganella Subs. They provide all of our food all the time at all of our races. Heck, I think they've been on just about as long as anybody. I was getting a sub sandwich one time from my local sub place down where I worked, and I just started chatting with him about hot rods, and he started talking back and mentioning how he'd be willing to help out at some events. And next thing I know, they are a huge contributor. It's so nice having somebody provide all the food for your whole team when you're gone for a week straight. That's a huge expense when you're paying for it out of your pocket like we are. That's a huge advantage for us, being able to have sponsors that'll step up like that.
Yeah.
And this year we picked up another one, Ground Control. A really good guy, really young kid. He just getting into drag racing. I've been helping him out a lot with his new car, and so he's stepping up to the plate this year too with his company. And we're going to run Outlaw 632 with his car this year. And I'm actually putting together a 79 Malibu right now, so we can go run open comp on the off weekends. We do a lot of junior dragster racing. One of my best friends, they bought a junior for their daughter recently, Hurricane Jenna. She's been doing extremely well. In fact, she won the points championship this year out of Milan, and we won a couple of events this year. She's got more wins than I do. Actually, it's pretty funny. But yeah, so we've been doing a lot of racing. We get out to the drag strip, and when you're racing just the junior, it's kind of, I don't want to say kind of boring, but there's a lot of time where we could be out doing something else. So if we had multiple cars out there, it'd be fun. Let the other people on the team drive the car and just kind of get the experience of being behind the wheel. I think it'll kind of broaden everybody's horizons on the whole team aspect of the deal.
So now, Brandon, when you first started drag racing, how was your mom towards drag racing? Did she support you?
Oh yeah, my mom's a huge part of my team. Like I said, my I don't know if I mentioned it, but my father's passed away. I don't know, 9 years ago or something like that. My mom's been a huge supporter since day one. Of course, being her baby, it was a little bit. At first, she was a little nervous, but I'll never forget the first few times we went out racing. I was getting very, very. Anything I do, I'm 100% committed and very serious about it. And I was manually shifting the car, had a shift light in it, and setting air pressure every pass. It was only a 12-second Chevelle at the time. And, but, we're out there having fun, and I'm taking it as serious as I can. And one weekend I had some event going on where I couldn't make it to the track, so my dad went out to the track and took my mom and made her drive. And, boy, she went faster than me, and I don't think I've ever heard the end of that. She rides my butt on that one all the time. I drive faster than you do. That's pretty funny. But I think once she got behind the wheel and realized that with all the safety equipment that you wear and stuff like that, it's a pretty safe sport, and especially in the cars we got nowadays. The safety equipment we have now, I feel safer in the car going 220 miles an hour than I do getting on the freeway sometimes. You got so many opportunities for for a wreck that you don't have any control over when you're around all these other people. But when you're behind the wheel, it's you and one other guy that you typically trust as a professional driver. And then of course you're wearing all the correct safety gear that you don't really have to worry about injury or if something stupid were to happen and you were to hit the other guy. It's not something that would normally happen. And of course, you go to big events, you might see a car-to-car crash, maybe 1 out of 1,000. It's pretty minimal issue there. But yeah, my mom's always been there. She goes almost every race. She's there.
So when you went down the track for the first time in that Chevelle, how was the experience? Were you nervous?
I was a little nervous about it because obviously first time at the drag strip and 12 seconds being at full throttle feels like all day. I mean, how many guys have been in a drag race on the street and you hammer the gas and you shift it in the second gear and you lift and you feel like you went, half a mile, but the reality is you probably only went about 300 or 400 feet. And, at the drag strip, you put your foot down and it just feels like, especially when you're only going 12s or 11s, you're still going 100 miles an hour, but it feels like it just takes forever to get there. And so, of course, you're looking for the end of the track, and you're thinking, have I driven, past the return road? I mean, this is getting crazy. But first couple passes, I went about half track and just kind of took it easy. And after that, it was kind of routine at that point. Had the same burnout practices, had the same staging practices. My dad had his routine. We were running a 12-second car, and my dad was taking weather notes and stuff like that. I mean, we're as serious as you could be in a slow car, but that's all we could afford back then. I guess we raced what we got, and we had a lot of fun with it. It really opened the door for where we're at now. If we hadn't done that, I doubt I would be racing right now.
So how was the experience for the first time with the Pro Mod going down the track?
That was funnier than heck, man. I got this car all together, and I'll never forget this. 131, Martin Speedway. I'm sure you know where that's at.
Yeah.
One of my favorite tracks around. I absolutely love it out there. The people that work there are just phenomenal. The surface is amazing. The pits are really good. Every time I go out there, even though I don't race there often, I've always had a really, really good vibe from those guys. And it was 2012, and I don't remember if you guys remember that year, but in 2012 it was super, super warm during winter. It was 60, 70 degrees all the way through February and March, and in March it got up into the 80s. Of course, it's never 80s in March. We're usually fighting snow and ice at that point in our season. But it was about 80 degrees one weekend, and I had the car all done. We'd just done Autorama with it, and I had a couple of puke tanks that I wanted to remount. I didn't care for how I had them mounted, and there was just a couple little detail things I had to do to make the car done. But, it was done enough to drive in and out of Kobo and done enough for Autorama, and it was just a couple of little minor details I had to do. And Martin calls me and says, hey, we're having a private test session. We're going to have 2 Pro Stock cars and about 10 bracket cars out here on Saturday, and we'd love for you to come out and bring your car. We know you got a new car, and we'd love to have you out here just to make a few passes. Totally free, just come out and make some passes. And I'll never forget, I was sitting there on my couch, and I was like, it was totally unexpected, and I kind of was caught off guard. I was like, I'm not quite ready yet. I think I'm going to wait, a couple weeks or whatever. And I hung up the phone, and I thought for about 2 seconds, and I'm like, what in the hell did I just do? I was offered to go to a track where there's going to be nobody around, and I can take my time, and if I screw something up, it's not a big deal. Of course, I couldn't dial the phone fast enough. I was like, I don't know why I just told you that, but we'll be there. And so we got out to Martin, and I've started this car 100 times at this point, just because I liked the way it sounded. I liked, going through the process. And we got out there, and I topped off the oil and primed it and fired it up in the pits. I was ready to go up. Towed it up to the starting line and fired the thing up. Everybody's standing around taking pictures. And all of a sudden, the crew just starts waving their arms, shut it off. I'm like, oh, what the heck just happened? Well, of course, being nervous as I was, I overfilled the oil tank, and I dumped about 2 or 3 quarts of oil in the burnout box. So, Of course, that was my very first experience with this thing, and I'm just freaking out. I'm nervous as a expecting for, you know. So we get the oil cleaned up, and I'm apologizing like crazy. They're like, dude, this is why we invited you out here. So I kind of relaxed a little bit. We went up for the second try, and my first burnout in the thing, everybody said it looked like John Force. I was about 300 feet before I lifted. It was a spectacle, to say the least. And I'd never done a burnout in a clutch car before. I was really nervous. So, I mean, I guess I figured it out quick. I backed the thing up, and I staged it, chipped it, and I let go of the clutch. And all I remember is the shift light come on, and I pulled second gear, and I said, okay, that's enough. And I shoved the clutch in, and I just coasted down the track. And I was like, yeah, it was pretty quick. It felt good. I turned off the end of the track, and guys there with the time slip, and he hands me the time slip, and it went 83, like 80 miles an hour or something like that. I was like, there is no way in hell I just went 880. I was only on the gas for about 2 seconds, it felt like. But, you know, going through both gears like that, first and second, of course it's a 4-speed, but first and second gear is a lot more than 2 seconds. So we went up for the next pass, and did basically the same thing, just went a little farther, and it went 850 or something like that on the second hit. And I was good, man. I put the thing back in the trailer, happy as a lark, and we went out that year, and, man, we tested every weekend. We ran and ran and ran and ran and ran. About late August, early September, I just ran out of cash, man. I just had to park it for a race. And that was actually when I got one of my biggest sponsors, my mechanical heating and cooling guys come up, and they said, we've been watching you all year. Where's your car at? I said, well, I'm out of money. Or actually, I told him, I said, I'm broke. And he goes, what do you mean? What'd you break? I said, no, the car's not broke. I'm broke. And they said, well, you know, what will it cost to get the rest of the season finished? So I told them, and they kind of looked shocked at me. And he said, well, I mean, what if we offered you this much to help finish out the rest of the season? And without that, I wouldn't have been able to finish that season. But we went out there, and that was the first race I won. Was the very next race. We turned the nitrous on. I'd been running on motor the whole season up to that point. Turned the nitrous on, and we went out. We were running 430s that weekend, and we wound up winning, going to the finals and won it. That was the first race I ever won, so it was really, really good season for us. And then every year after that, we just seems like we go out, and boy, I can't remember the last race we didn't qualify at. You know, that's always my big thing. You know, if we can get in the show, we can compete with any of them. So we always have fun getting in the show.
So what's the quickest time you've had with that car?
Last July at Milan, we went 420 at 170. We went 1,000 60 foot. I cannot get that car to go sub-second 60 foot, and it drives me nuts. But 420 at 170 in the eighth, and then in the quarter, I believe we went 652 or 657 at 212. I think was the biggest mile an hour I've had, and that was down in Shakedown 2 or 3 years ago. So then this year, like I said, we kept having issues with it. It ended up going, we went 666 at 207 or 209 or something, but it puked its guts out at about 1,000 feet because that block cracked. So not a good deal.
Now, when you take that car out, Brandon, how many crew members do you take with you, and who are your crew members?
I take half the track with me. I feel like half the time, but the main ones, my buddy Todd he's here every single day. Mikey is another one. He's basically, if I call those guys to do anything on the car, they're here. Mikey's new wife Sam, and then my friend Ricky and Patty. They're the parents of the junior dragster. They are huge supporters. Doug, which is Melissa's dad, that's my girlfriend's dad. He's been I'll never forget, him and my girlfriend used to come out to the track when I used to crew chief on a pro stock car, and they would hang out until we were done racing, and then when we were lost or whatever, the race was over, they were in the car and gone. And then they just kind of always wondered, you know, how can you spend this kind of money and dedicate this much time to something like this? I just don't get it. And then that first day at Martin, Doug and Melissa both had this look on their face like, oh yeah, we're into this stuff. So between Doug and Melissa, I've never made a single pass down the track in that car that Melissa didn't strap me in. So she's the number one in my opinion. She's always there for me. And of course, when it came time to finish the car up, and I was broke, and I said, I really don't have the money to finish the car. I should probably just sell it. She told me, you know what? Here's some credit cards. Put it on this credit. Let's get the car done. Then we can decide what we're going to do with it. And had she not been that supportive getting the thing finished, I probably would have just sold it and walked away from it. But without that, without that support at home, it's impossible to do this stuff like we do. And I got another buddy, Steve. He was an old crew member of mine back when we first started. He just moved back into town, and he's gonna come crewing with us this year too. So, but those are the main ones. Of course, then I got Reese as my data collector, crew chief, coordinator. That guy and his son Victor are big time part of this thing. Reese could tell you what I had for lunch on a past 2014 and what the air temperature was, what the tire. I mean, this guy takes more notes than anybody I've ever met, and that comes in immensely valuable when you're going back on stuff. You're either you get lost and you need to try to figure out where you're going, or if you want to make a change and you don't know what it'll do, you can use a scientific method to figure it out. You know, what did it do the last time we did that, or what is a change that's similar, and what was the effect when we did that? It's so helpful having guys like that on your team. It really, we'll call them like a geek. That without that type of person, you can have all the best mechanics in the world, and you're not going to do well if you don't keep notes and if you don't know what you did last week when you were out testing. So that's the primary group of guys we got.
Now, do you have any pre-race rituals or superstitions?
You know, I don't really have any big rituals. I do have. It's not really a superstition, but everybody yells at me. I'm sponsored by one of the best food sub shops in the state, and I never eat at the track. I just can't, and I don't know if it's nerves or what, but I don't ever get what I would call quote unquote nervous. I get anxious, like anxiety. So, and I know my blood pressure is probably through the roof when I get up there and adrenaline's flowing, but for some reason, like you could have a prime rib roast cooking and everybody's scarfing down food, and I just sit there and stare at them. I can't eat. That's probably my biggest. Again, it's not really a ritual or anything, but that's just my biggest. I guess you could call it a ritual. I eat when we're done.
Now, what goes into preparation to get that Pro Mod ready for a weekend of drag racing?
Well, I mean, my car is it's pretty easy. I mean, a lot of people say that clutches are a ton of work and it's really hard to maintain them and stuff like that. But the reality is, if you do it right and you do it, and I hate to say often, but if you do it correctly and you do it when it needs to be done, it really limits the amount of work you got to do. So I've run a Lenco transmission since day one, and I've never, ever, ever had a problem with the transmission itself. I did one time have a shifter fall off on it. The bolt came loose, and I just stuck the bolt back in it, and it was good to go. But, I mean, as far as the transmission is concerned, there's no real work to do there. I'm a ring and pinion guy, so I do a lot of ring and pinions for customers and stuff like that. So, every once in a while, every year, I'll pop the ring and pinion out, take a look at it, make sure everything's good. And then every year, I freshen the engine with new rods and pistons and everything. If there's any damage at a race or whatever, we fix it in between races. But the key is on the clutch. When you service that clutch, you keep everything flat, keep it wearing properly. I put as many as 16 to 20 runs on the thing, and it was still running fine. I just took it out and cleaned it up just so that I didn't have to cut a ton of disc off of it just to clean it up. That's the thing. If you run a whole season on a set of discs and then you try to clean them up, it's almost like you might as well throw them away because you got to cut so much off of them to get it down into the correct part of the material again. And then it also goes from one extreme to the next. The discs really get aggressive as they get glazed. So if you let them get super glazed, by the time you get them that hot and that glazed so many times, it's really hard to get them clean. It's almost better just to change them out.
Now, go ahead.
I was going to say, about every race, if you figure we bring the car home, we usually spend about 6 to 10 hours just cleaning stuff up, scrubbing the wheel wells, scrubbing down the wheelie bars, going through the motor, leaking it down, just looking at stuff, setting lash. And, other than that, the motor's super low maintenance and everything else. And that's how I am. I'm just kind of I don't want to, we're certainly not lazy. We're certainly not we don't skimp on anything. But what we do is we make sure that we look at the correct things. And of course, with this blower motor, it's going to be a lot more opening the engine up, looking at bearings, looking at certain things in the blower and stuff like that. So I know there's going to be a lot more maintenance with this new setup. We're just going to have to use other people's experience and input from other of my friends as a guideline to get started and create our own routine.
Now, what are some of your favorite tracks to run on?
Well, I mean, you can't not love Milan, or I mean Norwalk rather. I mean, you gotta love Norwalk when you go down there. That track, just you feel like you're racing at the Indy 500 when you go there. You got the big stands, and there's tons of people, and the pits are phenomenal, and you got plug-in electricity. I mean, it's just an awesome facility. But my home track, the place where I feel like I'm in my own backyard, is Milan. That's where we've always raced the Run What You Brung Heads Up series. And I know everybody there, and we always have a great time when we go out there. Pretty much everybody that's there in the races, I know them, and we're good friends, almost all of them. There's just a few people that I don't know yet, but that doesn't mean we won't know them soon, because they're all really great people. But then, of course, you got Martin on the other side of the state. Like I said, that track to me is, for what it is, the only problem with that track is its location. I think it has a hard time hosting a lot of the heads-up Pro Mod style series because of where they're located, but I would love for them to get a heads-up series like Milan's. I think if they could get another heads-up series out there that kind of mimics what they're doing at Milan and do it every other weekend, I think they would have a great turnout there, and I think it would be a really fun time to race. And it would give us another instead of racing once a month or twice a month, we could have run 3 or 4 times a month. It would give us just more opportunity to go out and beat up our stuff.
Now, you prefer quarter mile or eighth mile?
Oh, you gotta love quarter mile, man. That's where the fun starts at the 8th mile. But I mean, I always get asked this question: which do I like better? I like the fact that 8th mile you don't tear up as many engine parts. Seems like every time I really burn a piston is at about 1,000 feet. I'm never in the 8th. I hardly ever hurt stuff in the 8th. But it's so much fun when you click that little lever back and just kind of hang on, and that last couple seconds seems like it takes all day. And man, when you get to the end, you feel like you're flying the Millennium Falcon when those boards go by at 200 plus miles an hour. It's pretty awesome. But the new cars going 200 miles an hour in the 8th is, that's badass. That's really a lot. That's a lot of fun how fast these things go in the 8th mile now. Back if you would have asked me this when I was bracket racing, I would have told you 8th mile sucks, but nowadays, with how fast these cars are, 8 miles really, it's a lot of fun.
Now, where do you get all your fire safety equipment from, like your fire suit and everything?
So I started out with an RJS, and it really, to me, it was an SFI 20 suit, and I only needed a 15, but it's what they had in stock at the time, and I needed it for the next weekend, so I just went ahead and bought it. And that suit to me was really stuffy. I didn't feel comfortable in the car with it. I couldn't hardly reach my switches. It was really stuffy. So I went out and bought a Sparco, a SFI 15 Sparco, and man, that thing felt like you were wearing a layer of air. It was so comfortable, and I just felt I felt like I could drive better just because I was wearing that suit. And that's what I've worn ever since. Of course, I have to have a 20 with this blown motor, so I went out and I bought a used SFI 20 Simpson suit, which is it's a lot more like the Sparco. I'd say it's a lot softer than the RJS is. Of course, it's thicker than the Sparco, so I'm not quite sure if I'm going to like it or not. But price is right on it, and I figure if I wear it for a season, then I can go out and buy a new Sparco because they're not cheap, man. They're so expensive. And then I wear a Simpson Hybrid Pro, a neck restraint, and then a Simpson helmet. Then I've got real nice Sparco gloves. I bought them from a buddy of mine. I wouldn't have bought them new just because of how much they cost, but he had bought them new and he didn't like them because they were too big for him, and they fit me perfect. So I wound up getting them from him for a pretty good price, and I really like them. If I had to buy another set, I'd probably buy another pair just like them.
Now, if anybody listening in on this interview was thinking about driving a Pro Mod, what kind of advice would you give that person?
Well, I mean, I'll give you two bits of advice on a car. If you want something that's your own, that's unique, build something. You can build your own car and have the people that, if you don't trust your work building a chassis or building a rear end housing or something like that, there's people that'll do that stuff. There's guys that it's a lot of money and it's really sticker shock. But by the time you get done screwing around trying to do this stuff yourself and screw it up a couple of times and learn that what you did isn't going to work or it's not strong as it needs to be, you'll save your money in the long run if you just get the people that do the stuff for a living. You get them to do the stuff that you can't do. Now, as far as plumbing and laying things out and making brackets and stuff like that, if you're a decent fabricator, that's the kind of stuff that just about anybody can do. And then that's the stuff. It takes a long time to build a car. A lot of guys don't realize it. Like, I'm going to build a new car this year. Well, it may take more than a year to build a car. So that's one bit of advice. You really got to plan it out. But if you want to go racing and you want to do well and you want to have a good time and you want to save a little bit of money, you can't be afraid to buy a good used car. And you got to look around, and there's great deals out there on stuff. And if you buy a good used car, it'll be just the same thing as what a brand new one is, only it's got a couple passes on it. And you can buy stuff a year old, or you can buy stuff 10 years old that's still really good. You just got to know what you're buying, and don't be afraid to take people's advice. Start talking to some veterans about stuff and ask questions, and that's the part where a lot of people they're almost too proud to ask questions of people, and that's you have to ask questions because nobody knows everything. And unless you build cars for a living, you can't answer these questions all yourself right off the bat.
Now, if a person's never been drag racing before in their life and they're thinking about doing a pro mod, what kind of advice would you give? Would you give them advice to jump in a pro mod first, or do bracket racing first?
There's a lot of really cool classes out there that aren't pro mod, and if you wanted to go fast and you're into the heads up stuff, because to be honest with you, bracket racing to me is boring. I would do it just to go out and be at the track racing if there was nothing else going on. But to me, I'm a class racer. I like heads up racing, and there's so many cool classes out there. And one of the new ones that's getting more and more popularity every year is Outlaw 632. And you see a lot of different cars. You see full factory body cars with cages on them. You see full tube chassis pro stock cars. You see pro mod cars. One of my really good friends, Johnny Puccino, just went 416 naturally aspirated with a 632 and an old pro stock car down in Bradenton last weekend. So they fly, but it's not having to go out and run 370s. It's I would say it's a lot more affordable. It's heads up racing. It's good quality cars. It's good quality racing, and so I guess you don't have to go out and run pro mod right off the bat if you want to get into it in a lower echelon of racing. There's lots of other classes out there, even some of the drag radio classes, or even heavy streets, a really cool class. There's just a lot of opportunities out there that aren't pro mod, but they're just as similar. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, one of my buddies was doing the 632 out there in Bradenton last weekend. He had the shake route on run car, the Chevy Bolero.
Oh, the fit. That thing is beautiful. I love that car. That was my favorite car at the track the whole weekend. Believe it or not.
Yeah.
I love the old stuff. I like the old body styles, and that car. My uncle was down there with me. He was down in Tampa, and he come over and we hung out for the weekend. And I was looking at that thing, and I'm thinking to myself, this is what pro modified was 30 years ago. Before any of us ever got into drag racing, hardly. This is what these guys were doing, like Charles Carpenter and even Ricky Smith was one of the pioneers. There's a lot of the old pioneers that got into this stuff, and that's what they had back then. It was just they were modified. We'll call them like gassers more than anything, and they just kind of evolved from like a gasser type car into what pro modified is today. And it's really cool seeing those old body styles, those old cars still running.
Yeah. Then I had another buddy. He was doing pro mod, but he's got a blown knockout car. He was named Brad Berkshire. Man, he was up there. He runs in a group up here in Illinois. They get the pro mod group called Chicago Wise Guys.
Yeah, the Wise Guys. Sure, I know a lot of those guys.
Yeah, he was up there testing his car out, getting it ready for the Wise Guys year this year.
Yeah, that was actually one of the first years I went down to Bradenton. I try to go down there every year. It's a good opportunity to get out of town and just go have some fun with my uncle and hang out. A couple of my friends usually come with me, and the first year I went down there, I was talking to a couple of those guys. They had a I want to say it was an old Chevelle, and then the real old body style pro mod Chevelle, and then they had a newer body style white and orange '68 Camaro, and they were from the Chicago area, and they run with the Wise Guys. But that was a really fun weekend down there talking to those guys.
Yeah. So have you ever ran with any pro mod groups before you started?